So some of you may have heard this earlier, but we're going to share a story with you called You're the Best at Being You, and it would be fantastic if you could join in with a couple of things. So if you see me do this, it would be great if you can make the noise ah ha ha. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Of course. 1, 2, 3. Ah, ha, ha. Fantastic. And if you see me do this, can you make the noise? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Great, we're set. So, this story is for anyone who ever thought, even just for a moment, that there was something more they needed to do in order to be perfect. Mrs. Hippopotamus lived by a large waterhole with lots of her friends. Most of her days were filled doing all her favourite things, rolling in the mud, blowing bubbles, and bathing in the water. But the thing she loved to do more than anything else was to sing with her friends. One day, Mrs. Hippopotamus was enjoying a particularly satisfying mud bath when she looked up to see the gazelle leaping past her through the grass. Mrs. Hippopotamus noticed how graceful and elegantly she moved, as if she was as light as a feather. So, for the next couple of days, Mrs. Hippopotamus tried to be more like the gazelle. She tried to be more elegant in the way that she moved. She tried leaping around in the grass. She even tried rolling in the mud more elegantly. Mr. Hippopotamus couldn't help noticing all of this and asked, "What are you doing?" "Don't you think I look graceful and elegant?" she said. Laughed Mr. Hippopotamus. "No, you just look funny." And with that, Mrs. Hippopotamus buried her face in the water and blew sad bubbles out of her nose. The next day, Mrs. Hippopotamus was practicing her underwater singing when she looked up to see the giraffe strolling past. She couldn't help noticing her long, sleek neck and long, slender legs, and how being so tall meant she could be seen by everyone from far around. So, for the next couple of days, Mrs. Hippopotamus tried to be more like the giraffe. She tried walking on her tiptoes and sticking her neck out and taking extra long steps, which on your tiptoes is very tricky, by the way. Mr. Hippopotamus couldn't help noticing all of this and asked, "What are you doing?" "Don't you think I look tall and slender?" she replied. Laughed Mr. Hippopotamus. "No, you just look funny." And with that, Mrs. Hippopotamus buried her face in the water and blew sad bubbles out of her nose. The next day, Mrs. Hippopotamus was enjoying scratching her back up against a tree when she looked up to see the monkey swinging in the branches. She noticed how acrobatic and effortlessly she sprung from branch to branch as if it was no trouble at all. So, for the next couple of days, Mrs. Hippopotamus tried to be more like the monkey. She tried jumping off logs and hurling herself over the river. She even tried doing forward rolls in the mud. Mr. Hippopotamus couldn't help noticing all of this and asked, "What are you doing?" "Don't you think I look acrobatic and effortless?" she replied. Laughed Mr. Hippopotamus. "No, you just look very, very funny." And with that, Mrs. Hippopotamus buried her face in the water and blew more sad bubbles out of her nose than ever before. Mr. Hippopotamus had noticed that she seemed to be taking things rather seriously, so wading over to her, he innocently asked, "What's wrong?" "Oh, I noticed how elegant and graceful the gazelle was, and I wanted to be like her. And then there's the giraffe who's so tall and slender, and I wanted to be like her. And the monkey who's so acrobatic and effortless, and I thought I could be like her. And with that, Mrs. Hippopotamus let out a big, sad sigh. Mr. Hippopotamus was beginning to understand what had been going on for the last few days. So wading over to her, he looked deep into her eyes and said, "But my dear, if you were like the gazelle, then who would roll around in the mud with me? And if you were like the giraffe, then who would blow bubbles with me and sing to us all? And if you were like Monkey, or anyone else at all, then who would be my favourite hippopotamus in the whole wide world?" Suddenly Mrs. Hippopotamus's heart swelled with joy and pride, and she flung her arms around Mr. Hippopotamus, who squeezed her right back. Then, after a couple of happy tears and giggling at how silly she'd been, she came down to the waterhole to sing with her friends. The elephant, the meerkat, and the tree frog. You can't be the chimpanzee and the tiger's taken too. In the whole wide world, you're the best at being you. You can't be the crocodile or the kangaroo. But as we love you as you are, just stick with being you. So sing it loud, 'cause we all know that it's true, and sing it proud. You're the best at being you. You can't be the giant whale or the tiny shrew. But as we love you as you are, just stick with being you. Lots of great things in the world, some wrong and some are new. But as we love you as you are, just stick with being you. So sing it loud.